Welcome to another episode of Counselor Soapbox videos. This episode, Drug Counseling Part 11, we talk about recovery. There's a difference between treatment and recovery. Treatment comes first. After treatment comes the process of recovery. Treatment is a formal process. It's done by professionals. It should be science-based, and it includes both interventions and services. It may include classes on skills and tools used to achieve sobriety. Recovery is a lived experience. It's an ongoing process. During this process, you become clean and sober, and people get their lives under control. There is more health and wellness as a part of this recovery. Recovery paradigms. Recovery is strength-based. It promotes resiliency. Wellness and recovery is not illness-focused. It's development of a personally created recovery plan. And the client should develop recovery capital and create a wellness toolbox. Recovery is a process. It is long-term, peer-to-peer, and may involve sponsorship. Some people have recovery mentors or coaches. It's important in recovery to develop a support system. It's important to understand how addiction develops. Addiction is more than simply picking up and using a drug. Addiction is best understood as a disease. This disease is chronic, it is relapsing, progressive, and if left untreated, addiction is a fatal disorder. There are many aspects or dimensions of recovery. Recovery includes thinking, feeling, behaviors. It includes the biological part of your life, the social part, economic recovery, and making meaning out of what has happened and what will happen. Recovery can also include spiritual aspects, housing aspects, and educational aspects. One way of viewing the shift from active addiction to recovery is to look at the two as cultures. There is a culture of addiction and a culture of recovery. Culture is composed of a number of elements. There's the language you use. Addiction, or drinking, involves a particular language. So does recovery. The way people dress often changes as they move from addiction into recovery. They give up the elements that remind them of the drinking and using lifestyle. There are certain rituals that are involved, and they may shift from the rituals involved in preparing and administering a drug or drinking in a bar to the rituals involved in a self-help group. Culture also involves your social connections, who you spend your time with, the places you go, and may even include the foods that you consume. When people are in their addiction, frequently a healthy appetite and a healthy food choices stop. When you get into recovery, you may find that you are eating more healthy food and improving your exercise in an effort to be physically healthier. Perhaps a definition of recovery will help. SAMHSA defines recovery as, recovery is a process of change whereby individuals work to improve their own health and wellness and to live a meaningful life in a community of their choice while striving to achieve their full potential. Researchers have identified some principles of recovery. It should be person-driven. There may be many pathways. It is holistic, often supported by peers, and supported through relationships. Recovery is culturally based. It should be trauma-informed, as many people in recovery have experienced trauma. It includes individual, family, and community strengths and responsibilities. Recovery is based on respect, and it emerges from a sense of hope. Professionals try to match the interventions to the stage of change the client is in. It's important to note that clients may be in different stages of change for different problems. Someone might be ready to end their homelessness, but not ready to give up their drugs. Or they might be willing to stop one drug, but not another. Initially, people who are trying to change or may begin to change are in pre-contemplation. They don't know they have a problem and they're not sure they would want to change it even if they did. In this stage, the counselor provides accurate information and education based on the original assessment. When the client is in the contemplative stage, you begin to work on their ambivalence. What are the good parts of quitting? What are the bad parts? What would be the good parts of being clean and sober? What might be the disadvantages? Once clients are in a preparation, sometimes called determination stage, the counselor in the program will focus on the consequences of an action or an inaction. As the client moves into action, the counselor will support and provide positive reinforcement for the things the client is doing. When the recovering person enters the maintenance stage, this will involve skills building and relapse prevention. One phenomenon that's been studied is a thing called natural recovery. Sometimes people spontaneously stop using drugs or alcohol and change their life and their thinking. This could happen as a result of marrying or having a child, getting a new important job, or developing a circle, a group of non-using friends. Some people simply age out. We sometimes call this maturation. Typically, drugs and alcohol are a young person's activity. As you get older, you may simply lose your interest in or desire to do that. Many people attribute their recovery to a religious conversion. It could also be an affiliation issue. If you're a member of a fraternity, you might use or drink while you're a part of that fraternity. Or you might be affiliated with another group, which is a non-using group. Some people report that their impetus for recovery was a result of becoming simply sick and tired of being sick and tired. There's also a situational factor. During Vietnam, many people began to use heroin. We expected when they returned to the U.S. that they would continue and there would be a huge need for treatment. In fact, when people moved from that situation to a return normal situation, back with their families and children and working a job, many of them spontaneously gave up the heroin. Unfortunately, a few found it very difficult and needed treatment, and many are continuing to need treatment even to this day. How do you measure recovery? There are a number of possible measures. We could measure it in terms of time, days, weeks, months, hopefully years. We could measure it by meeting the goals that were put on the original treatment plan. It could also be measured by emotional health or functioning. By occupational functioning, can they get and hold a job? Or by other important areas of their life. There are 6 possible domains that could be measured. One is physical, their medical health status. Second is chemical dependency status. We use the ASI, Addiction Severity Index, to look at how their chemical dependency has affected all the parts of their lives. We could certainly look at their recovery in terms of mental health, and many people benefit from seeing a therapist and being screened for possible mental illnesses using the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. We also need to measure recovery in terms of family and social functioning, and many people measure their recovery in terms of changes in and improvement in their spiritual or religious functioning. Feelings work is an important part of recovery. Feelings have gotten a bad reputation, people believing you should simply think rationally and not feel feelings. Many people are essentially emotionally illiterate. Some people report having a lack of feeling skills. We sometimes describe this issue as alexithymia. That is, they have no words to describe that feeling. Clients will say they feel either good or bad or pissed off. Feelings can provide important sources of information to you, and so it's important to learn about feelings. Some people are simply afraid to feel, thinking that if they feel something bad, they will be overwhelmed. And some people feel guilty for having feelings. People who have developed addiction or alcoholism may have come through periods, long periods, in which they simply didn't feel anything because they were numb as a result of using the drugs and alcohol. There is a process they need to go through in doing feeling work. First is simply to recognize that you are feeling something. Then, to separate the feelings from thoughts and actions. Often people say, I feel such and such, when they really mean they think or believe it. If you're having that feeling, it's helpful to locate this feeling in the body. Where in the body are you feeling it, and what is that part of your body feeling? Once you have determined that you're feeling something, you've located it, then you need to identify it, develop a name for it. There's over 100,000 words in the English language to describe feelings, but most people only know the feeling names of one or two feelings. Having identified it or named it, then you can decide, what do you want to do with this feeling? This puts you in charge of the feelings rather than the feelings in charge of you. It's important to know that memories of feelings may be very inaccurate. There's a phenomenon called confabulation, in which people whose memory has been impaired by drugs or alcohol, when asked to remember something or trying to call up that memory, the brain will do a thing called confabulation. If you don't remember what happened at the party last Friday, your brain will go back and search for other parties at that same place and fill in the missing details. It's also important to know that people who consume alcohol may suffer from blackouts, full or partial. When the level of alcohol in the bloodstream rises rapidly, the person's brain memory stops recording. It's important to know that blackouts are not the same thing as passing out. Blackouts, people are walking around, talking, doing things, but the next day have no memory for that portion of the evening. That blackout may fade in and out depending on the alcohol level in the bloodstream. As the level drops, people remember more, then they take some more drinks and the memory fades out again. It's also common to have what's called euphoric recall. That is, you remember the great wonderful times while you were drinking or doing drugs, but tend not to play the tape all the way to the end and remember the bad things that happened. There's also a thing called state-dependent learning. Sometimes things that people learn while under the influence of a drug can only be retrieved by the brain when that drug is present. So they may have difficulty remembering what really happened while they were drunk or high until they put drugs or alcohol in their body again. Feelings can be a large cause of relapse. 3/4 of alcohol relapse are due to unpleasant feelings. Interpersonal conflicts or relationships, people, can be a big cause of those negative feelings and relapse. Social pressure, places, can also be a cause of relapse. Many people in recovery, no longer numbing out, begin to experience feelings of grief and loss, and those feelings can result in an urge to use or drink again. Learning about relapse triggers is an important safeguard against relapse. There are 3 principal types of relapse triggers. External ones fall into the category of people, places, and things. Hanging out with people you used to drink and use with probably will trigger a relapse. Going to places where you did your drinking and using also can be a cause of relapse. And for some people, things, collections of memorabilia, pipes, drinking glasses, and so on, can remind them of their drug of choice and encourage a relapse. An acronym that's often used to explain relapse triggers is HALT. HALT stands for hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. All of these are things which may cause relapse. Notice that these are essentially internal states: being hungry, being angry at someone else, feeling lonely, or being physically tired. Through this and the previous slide about people, places, and things, we've looked at both internal and external triggers, both of which can be important challenges to a person's recovery. Behavior is an important aspect of recovery. Self-efficacy, the belief that if you try, you can do it, is an important thing to develop in recovery. Many people have become hopeless, and getting back that sense of hope is important for their recovery. Behavior is a learned experience. Any behavior that has been learned can be unlearned. Another way of looking at these things is that often our adult problems are things, skills, or behaviors that we learned between 8 and 18, and that they don't work for us as adults. People then, unable to cope with life using the skills they have or the plan, blueprint in their head for how to live, may resort to the use of drugs and alcohol in order to live life. Dry drunk is a concept you'll hear in recovery circles. It involves people who are not drinking or using, but still have all of their old behaviors. They may be impulsive, moody, irresponsible, and angry. You can see people who've not used or drank for a number of years, and still they are miserable. They have not moved fully into recovery. There's also a concept called behavioral tailoring. That is, that gradually people shift their behavior using an increase in positive behavior. That may include taking medication, exercising, scheduling their life, or creating a daily routine that encourages them to stay clean and sober. Cognitive changes occur as a result of addiction and alcoholism, and for recovery to happen, many of these cognitive changes need to be reversed. There may be changes in thoughts, beliefs, attitudes, and particularly self-statements. What you say about yourself tends to come true. Many people suffer from a thing called cognitive distortions, which is sometimes described as irrational or dysfunctional beliefs. A newer way of looking at that is to say, do you have unhelpful thoughts that are making your life more difficult? And you may need to work on changing those unhelpful thoughts. Large among those unhelpful thoughts are negative self-talk. What are the things you tell yourself? If you tell yourself that you're stupid, you will probably have difficulty learning things. All of these cognitive changes are areas that require work in recovery. Here are some of the major unhelpful thoughts that a person in recovery may be faced with. One is something we call demandingness. I should be doing this. I must be doing that. I have to do so-and-so. I need to. All of these demands may be difficult or impossible, and putting those extra demands on yourself may impair, reduce your ability to recover. There's also a thing called awfulizing or catastrophizing. This absolutely must not happen to me. The truth is, life happens, and being able to handle life, its ups and downs, clean and sober is an important part of recovery. Some other important unhelpful thoughts that you may need to look at. Low frustration tolerance. Many people simply can't stand this or that. I could not stand it if. Also, there's a thing called overgeneralizing. I made one mistake, that means I will never be able to do this. The nevers, the always, the everybody, the nobody, these absolutes are unhelpful. Black and white thoughts. I either get all A's or I'm a failure is a very unhelpful thought that may lead to relapse. And another thought is, if I am not perfect, I am worthless. None of these unhelpful thoughts turn out to be either true or helpful. Two other unhelpful thoughts cause a lot of problems in recovery. One is mind reading. This is the expectation that if you love me, you would understand and know what to do. Or if I have to explain this to you, you wouldn't understand it anyway. These are requests for people to read their mind. We find this comes up often in relationship counseling, where one or the other party is really asking their partner to read their mind and know ahead of time. Emotional reasoning is also another problem in recovery. Emotional reasoning says, if I feel depressed, then everything is bad and nothing will work. Or, if this scares me, then it's really dangerous. Not everything that causes you anxiety is in fact dangerous, and there may be dangers that you don't feel anxious about. Some more examples of unhelpful thoughts. Personification. This is the idea that it's all about me. You walk in the room and people laugh, you assume it's because of that. Many people believe they are unique. Well, I know this worked for other people, but it won't work for me. People who go to self-help groups often hear their exact same life story told by someone else. Many people believe that if you were me, then you would need to drink. The should statements. Also filtering, discounting the positive. Some people cannot remember the things they've done correctly, but only the one or two mistakes they might have made. Saying nothing good ever happens to me discounts all of your positive life experiences. Telling yourself no one likes me is probably a very untrue statement. It is certainly an unhelpful statement. First part of recovery involves you beginning to like yourself. Then there is at least one person who likes you. Another part of recovery is developing additional interpersonal skills. Some people need assertiveness training. Assertive behavior is not the same thing as being aggressive. Some people find they're very passive and never stand up for themselves, or they are too aggressive. There's also an indirect kind of relating where people are passive-aggressive. They don't say no, but they simply sabotage things by not doing what they were supposed to have done. Martin Seligman did a lot of studies and has written about a thing called learned helplessness. If in the past you have tried, but have been criticized that what you did was not good enough, you may have learned to be helpless and believe that you can't be successful. If you have learned to be helpless, it is possible for you to learn ways to be less helpless, to be more able to do things. Part of relapse recovery is avoiding high-risk situations. We've talked about these as triggers in the past, but some of the aspects here are people. Avoiding old using buddies or being aware that when you meet them, this may be a high-risk situation. Places. A saying in recovery circles is that if you hang out in a barber shop, you will probably get a haircut. People who hang out in bars probably will drink. People who hang out in crack houses are going to smoke crack cocaine. Things are also a high-risk situation. Being around collections, liquor collections, collections of pipes, or collections of shot glasses, all kinds of things that may remind you of your past addiction. There are times and situations. Anniversary dates can be a particularly strong high-risk situation. Visual, seeing things like needles. I've had some clients who couldn't watch a movie about addiction because simply seeing someone holding a hypodermic needle triggered strong urges for them to use again. And smells can be a powerful memory cue. Smells of certain things may trigger or put you at high risk for a relapse. People in recovery need to learn skills to handle urges. These skills need to be over-practiced until they become automatic. For people with an addiction, drinking and using has become their automatic behavior. So recovery behaviors need to be made equally as automatic. Some of the ways that people can handle urges are to wait it out. It's common for people to believe, I just can't stand it, and then give in on, I'll only do this once. The trouble is, even one use will reinforce your addiction. If you can wait it out, then you have a better chance. There's a technique called surfing the urges, the idea here being that urges to drink or use will rise just like a wave on the ocean. And if you wait long enough without giving in, those urges will go back down, often because you simply get busy doing other things. There's a thing called stopping the thought or thought stopping. Tell your brain simply no, knock it off. Other people find it helpful to use a technique called playing the tape all the way to the end. Not only remembering the positive euphoric recall part of drinking or using, but play the tape to the end and remember the negative consequences, the physical illness, the damaged relationships, maybe the getting arrested and time in jail or legal consequences. Also, keeping in mind what good things might happen to you if you do not pick up again. Often those good things are far outweigh the potential pleasure of picking up. Learning to substitute a healthy behavior for drinking and using behaviors. Many people find it very helpful to go and attend a self-help group meeting. And anything that distracts yourself without also creating a new negative can be helpful. Do something that you enjoy to do that has positive consequences. All of these are ways of handling urges should they come up. What should someone do if they have a relapse? Well, the worst thing you can do is believe because you've relapsed, you'll never get clean and sober and give up trying. Another recovery saying is if your rear end falls off, what should you do? Pick it up and take it to a meeting. And people often are afraid to return to self-help groups after having relapsed. But what happens in Alcoholics Anonymous, what do they say to people after they've relapsed? Most places will say, we're glad you made it back. Why? Because many people who relapse never do get back into recovery. Rather than judging people for a relapse, people who work in recovery field believe that relapse is a common part of the drug using experience. Once you become an addict, you're at risk to relapse. A single relapse should not deter someone from trying to get clean and sober. It just is another learning opportunity. What's ahead for the Counselor's Soapbox video channel? More in our Learning About Drug Counseling series, more drug education videos, and a series on mental health and wellness. If you've enjoyed this video, please click the like button directly below. For more information, please visit the counselorsoapbox.com blog, where you will find articles on mental health, substance abuse, and having a happy life. The David Joel Miller fiction and nonfiction books are available on Amazon.